Here. All right, I believe we're recording. All right, thank you guys for joining. This is HSAM Talk More or Less. I have Joey DeGrandis on. We're just going to be discussing our HSAM, talking about our experiences, maybe deviate to some weird topics later on. But Joey, you want to introduce yourself?
We're going to be solving all the problems of the world, Brennan. Yes, I am Joey DeGrandis, also fellow HSAMmer. And excited to talk about the ins and outs and anything HSAM related.
All right. Do you want to explain your backstory or?
Sure, I could, and it's funny because I know I've heard this particular story a couple times in that you're a kid and you discover that you have it. I'm thinking primarily of another of the kid that was on 60 Minutes with me, who at the time was 10, and he was talking about how he was sort of around that age when he was like it was new to him basically. So I don't know if 10 is not the number, but I feel like a lot of us start figuring it out around then. Perhaps around like early adolescence or whatever. But I was 10, and so maybe that's a coincidence, maybe not, but I happened to actually be 10 years old when I just started to, it just clicked. Like it was a thing that I would kind of just roll off the tongue, like we did this on this day, or I would link a memory up to the date or vice versa. And the only reason that I kind of that I was stopped in my tracks was because my parents would always sort of look at me and say, like, how did you know that?
Right.
Because the average person, certainly like in our or in their orbit or in our world, like didn't easily recall dates that quickly, or they weren't able to, like, people that I knew certainly weren't able to like link a memory up to a date, or as I said, or vice versa. So that's when I sort of knew that it was something that was unique. But flash forward 16 years from that point until I'm 26, and I'm kind of just thinking it's a thing I can do and it's a party trick, and I kind of didn't realize that scientific minds were actually studying the chemical processes of HSAM. Neurobiologists had been probing it, and I found that out because of the first 60 Minutes installment, the one that featured Mary Lou Henner. So there it is, like a 15, 16-year gap where I'm just sort of like, yeah, I'm kind of a date freak. I never use those words, that's mean, but just I have a date ability. I would call it all kinds of things. People would say, do your date thing whenever we got together, like, oh, what day of the week was it, and it was fun, almost a little annoying, like, in a dance monkey dance kind of way, like I'm the show puppet. But so I guess it was nice then to learn, watching the first installment of the 60 Minutes, like to get some context for it. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
To
Yeah.
sort of see that, oh yeah, this is actually like that neurobiologists are trying to understand what happens in the brain that makes us remember, that makes us forget, why, and the larger, I think, probably the thing that's most important as I see it in all of this, and the research at least, is to figure out why people lose their memories. So there's application down the road, which excites me, for things like Alzheimer's or memory loss. Maybe, and I'm not saying we're the key, but people with HSAM, the way that one brain area of our brain talks to another, that's, I think, what scientists are trying to get at. Like, how is it that we're able to retrieve the memories so quickly? What are the retrieval mechanisms, and how can they be sustained, perhaps, and not be lost in older age and things like that?
Right.
Yeah.
I do have a question. So I've talked about how I've kind of developed the date concept when I was about 14, almost 15 years old.
Mhm.
But when I was like 2 or 3, my grandmother would always say, "Oh my God, you have a memory like an elephant. Like, how can you remember stuff that was like a year ago and you were talking about going to the park and picking up a random rock? Like, how do you remember that?" And so I always knew on my end that I had a good memory, but it wasn't until I was I was almost 16 years old. So a year after that, but I realized I was so fluent in dates rather than, oh yeah, well, October 5th is when I asked my first girlfriend out or whatever.
Mhm.
So how does that translate to your life when you were a child of memory?
I mean, I guess I'm trying to think how to answer that. I mean, one thing that just popped into my head was I've always been a deep analytical thinker and a very emotional person. So I asked myself the question, it's sort of a chicken and an egg thing in my head. Am I just a naturally sensitive, sort of emotionally in touch person that's over analytical that just happens to have HSAM and this ability, or does the ability itself kind of fuel things like my love of history, deeper analyzation of things, dwelling on things? I think it's probably a combination of both.
Gotcha.
But that definitely has always been. I think living in a memory, and maybe not even experiencing it viscerally per se, but just having emotionality attached to it, and just however my brain processes memory or thinks about it, reflects on it. Sometimes it can be really heavy, And I love that I'm reflective. Like this whole thing is a blessing and a curse in that sense. Like it's wonderful to be reflective and to sort of be intimately connected to your timeline, as I like to say it. But the burden of that is, of course, that you carry a lot of weight, or you could dwell on it.
All right. Yeah, that somewhat answers the question, but did you always have a good memory as a child, more or less, or was it more average back then?
Oh yeah, I would say I had a pretty good memory, but not a great memory. And this is, I think, something that HSAM research has determined thus far, in part at least, that like short-term memory is not great, or it's not particularly stellar, right? For people like us, it's the long-term stuff. For whatever
Right.
reason, for whatever reason that we're remembering this thing that happened 5, 6, 7, 10 years ago, we're remembering it. I'm not sure how that happens, but but then again, sometimes this is so strange, Brandon. I don't know if you have the same kind of thing that happens. Sometimes I can't remember if I brushed my teeth that night. Really, like it's weird. I'm embarrassed almost to admit that, and people that know that I have HSAM would scoff and be like, I don't believe that. What do you mean? You remember everything? No, I will not remember sometimes. Maybe it's the
Gotcha.
mundane nature of the activity. Yeah, I'm curious, I guess, to hear any of your experiences, or like your story with HSAM and how you kind of came about it as well.
Um, yeah, so I mean, just to answer that, yeah, McGaw did say on what was it, the 60 Minutes or another one of the episodes where he was like, yeah, H-Sammers don't have a great memory, we're poor forgetters.
Poor forgetters. Yep, yep, yep.
So it was just, I was kind of asking, like, did your parents pick up on your memory when you were a child, more or less, is what I was kind of going at.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing was that, and this is purely coincidental. My mom was a very studious like date keeper of appointments and things. She had a calendar on her desk from the Sierra Club. I remember every year, like for Christmas, we got her new Sierra Club calendar. She would write everything in the at 4 o'clock today, Heather's tap recital, Joey's performance tonight, night at the school. Everything we did, I mean, our entire life was chronicled in that calendar. So she could always cross-reference when I said, "Oh, we went to go apple picking on this day," or this was the night that she came to my school, or whatever, right? So she would always be able to cross-reference. So that's kind of how my parents started to say, like, that's unique, not odd, not bad, just that's wow, that's an ability I can't remember. Dad can't remember. Anybody that we know can't really quickly like that on the drop of a hat, go back to a memory or know the date that a memory occurred. So that's when I think it was, okay, this is something unique in you. This is an above average memory. This is something that not everybody can do so easily. You know what I mean? That's kind
Right.
of how
Yeah.
that manifested. Yeah.
And that actually I mean, two things come to mind when you said that. So my grandmother did the same exact thing, and that's how she knew I had a great memory as a child, because she would cross-reference when I was there, and like not really, I wasn't doing dates at like 2 years old, but the idea and what we did around that time was documented in a calendar.
Okay, so
But
she kept the calendar too.
yeah, exactly, and that was her thing. Like I remember like the not butterfly, but this like red dotted room. Like the house was built in the 50s and they never really changed the wallpaper in it when they bought it. So it's been like that since maybe for 20 years or 30 years, as long as they've lived there. And I remember going, I mean, there's this calendar right by the oven, and I would always look at it and do the same exact thing. But another thing comes to mind, and when I first started developing the memory for dates, I would actually go back and read through old text messages to reference what I was doing on that day.
Hmm.
Like I'm thinking like I would do all these like more analytical patterns. So it'd be like 41 days after this. Okay, I want to go 41 days back. And then I was trying to see what happened on that day. And then like, oh yeah, that was this and this and this. And then I built this entire network of information from that.
That's
And
cool.
that that's
Yeah,
probably where my 700-day calendar or something around the lines of that started forming.
that's interesting. What you're saying this, Brennan, reminds me not just that every of the different varieties of this condition, but how like oh, I had a thought and I lost it. It'll come to me. I think it was basically just like how the the actual recall happens differently for different people, but there was something. I'll come back to it. I'll come back to it. Oh, that's it. I'm wondering if there's a link between things like obsessive compulsive disorder or tendency for I don't want to use the wrong terminology here, but like it's some sort of thing that is a commonality for HSAMers, that it's like that
Mhm.
tends towards behavior that is either obsessed with numbers, kind of like you were just saying, like you count the 41 days before 41 days, or and that kind of bleeds into like OCD territory. Not
Yeah.
labeling it as a negative thing, just pointing out like there are patterns that I've noticed, and it sounds like maybe you can relate a little, like where
Mhm.
there's certain OCD traits or whiffs of OCD mannerisms and behaviors. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, definitely. Like 400 and I mean there's this like day 428 for me back in on September 10th, 2018. And ironically, 427 days ago was the first time I uploaded an HCM video, the last interview I did.
Wow,
Not just the first one, but the last one.
that's so cool. Wait, what is September 10th, 2018?
So that was so I had this like day zero, and it reoccurs every 700 days for whatever reason. Sunday, July 9th, 2017. Just everything went to hell. Like this giant conflict, my parents, different things, going to a new school, like getting my freshman year started, stuff like that. And 78 days after that, I actually lost, and I started remembering dates. I kind of went through this like murky area where I completely lost the ability to forget. And but I mean, 350 days after that is kind of when things settled down. All the problems that I had, for whatever reason, I can't explain it. God's hand, like if you want to go in that direction or whatever, just ended within that week.
Hmm.
I had a hate mob. My ex created a hate mob against me. That ended. Got a new, asked a new girl to homecoming. Got my learner's permit, which I worked 9 months for. Just all these little things that I've been like, for whatever reason, could not get past that line. Ended within September 10th and September 17th and stuff like that. So I've always kind of not worshipped day 428, but it's always been kind of that rallying cry for if things are going bad. I'm like, okay, well, we've done this before, we can do it again, like
Yeah,
mentality.
like resilience. Yeah,
Mhm.
that's cool.
And
But
then go
yeah,
ahead.
no, I was just I'm just that's cool, and I'm amazed that even to point out day 427 or day 428, I feel like our brains just do something with numbers and patterns, and
Mhm.
we kind of gravitate there. Maybe we find a comfort in that, or there's a natural tendency to order our lives in this way, you know. And this is maybe while we're talking about numbers, something I just thought of is like I guess the Julian calendar. I could be wrong about this. I pride myself as a history nerd, but so don't crucify me if I'm wrong with this. But I think around the 1580s is when the Julian calendar, the calendar that we use today, kind of came to
Mhm.
being. And it's not that I can't do dates before that time, but I have to actually think about the date if it's more than like 4, 5, 600 years ago. You know what I mean? There's probably about a 200-year window on either side that I can, at the snap of a finger, identify the date with the day of the week. But if it goes further back, I have to think about it. And I feel like
Mhm.
there's math. And I mean, there is math involved that I'm doing in my head, but I just wonder why. Like, it's just at the end of the day, it all just feels kind of like so arbitrary numbers and things that we've assigned. And why do we, it's just, it fascinates me. I
Are
don't know if
you
it makes sense for that, but
are
what,
you familiar with the January, October, April, July pattern? like how day of the weeks correspond to but the month.
Say that again. The January.
January, October,
Yeah.
April, July,
Uh-huh.
skip 427 days, ironically. September, December,
Yep.
June, March, November, August, May, back to January.
Wow. I like kind of know that, but that's yet again just an example of how our brains find these patterns. And
Mm-hmm.
for what one pattern I think that what you said, I like now I can see what you're saying. You're saying like the calendar date, like Tuesday, January 1st is Tuesday, October 1st on a non-leap year, right?
Right.
The thing I'm in my head a lot on is the 28 year cycle. 28, 56, 84, 112, right? It's the exact same calendar year.
Mm-hmm.
So we're in 2022. It was the exact same. It was Sunday, October 23rd, 1994, right? And it will be Sunday, October 23rd, 2050, right? 28 years in the future.
Yeah.
And it was Sunday, October 23rd, 1966, 1938,
Mm-hmm.
1910, going all the way back.
Do
So
you know the 44-year pattern?
the 44-year pattern? Do tell.
So it's similar to the 28, but every 11 years it will repeat. But once it hits the full, like, just like every 4 years is a leap year, so every 44 times 11 is 44, you actually shift a day back. So like Tuesday, let's do my birthday, Tuesday, December 17th, 2002. Tuesday, December 17th, 1991. And then 1980, I believe, is still a Tuesday, but before that, it shifts to a Wednesday. And that goes back 44 years. And then it shifts Thursday and so on and so forth.
That's wild. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I'm just amazed at all this stuff. How our brains find these patterns. Yeah.
Yeah. And a lot of even H-Simmers themselves are like, no, like they can't relate to this, so they're like, no, it's not HSAM like that. So we go down that rabbit hole. I'm like, no, like we're doing it because of the memories themselves. Then we relate to months. We just have to use the logic behind it to more or less connect the dots rather than.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot going on there, and also, as we've talked about before, the research is so new, relatively speaking.
Yeah,
there's not even. I mean, there's kind of data coming in, but it's new and fresh. So it's like we are recently, we are newfound guinea pigs to the scientific community. It's sort of how I look at it. You know what I mean? So in that sense, like it's not clearly definable because there's just a lot of data now that's being collected and gathered. You know what I mean? Or at least when I was every time I was visiting McGaw in California, I feel like they were always trying to gather data points on me.
Yeah.
And trying to, again, a lot of the stuff, and so for the last 10 or so years, it's not as frequently anymore, but I've sort of been, and actually not in recent years, but I've been in contact with the lab, and they will sometimes ask me to do tests, quote unquote, which will essentially try to determine my short and long-term memory. You know what I mean?
Right.
We'll do the thing of like, look at the table, look at all the objects on the table, take it away, take the image away, what was on the table, right? A lot of times I won't be able to do it, but then they'll ask me what I was doing on this date, October 23rd, 2012, 10 years ago, and I'll say, oh, well, I was doing this, and it was a week before Hurricane Sandy in New York. Like I can do it so well, but the short term, we go back to the short term being kind of fuzzy or not reliable.
Yeah, I've always picked up on that. Like I even posted on when I first joined the HSAM community, I posted like, yeah, we're horrible at short term. And my theory is we're so much in our long-term memory, we never exercise that short-term memory.
Yeah. And this also makes me think of like the intersectionality a little bit with, call it mental health or just anxiety. Like I don't know if every HSAMer is anxious or has the potential to have anxiety, but I think that it can, for me at least, perhaps it's the anxiety has come from just feeling very overwhelmed by the memories, by the dates, by the ability and stuff. And you just touched on something interesting. Like I was always forgetting stuff as a kid, like objects. I swam on a swim team when I was a kid, so I goggles, swim trunks, swim shoes, T-shirts, sunglasses, glasses. Like I lost so many items growing up. It became kind of a joke, and and also something that was not very, I couldn't explain it, and everyone in my life couldn't understand because they thought I had this perfect memory.
Yeah.
You know, and it's again, it's just that short term, as much as I can explain it, which I don't know if this is the correct way to do it, but I was in the moment, I was just very overwhelmed and or anxious and kind of thinking about whatever was overwhelming me in the moment. And so you're less likely to capture or remember or prioritize remembering your items in that moment, right? So you're less, right. But it's a real kind of what's the word? It's a, not a contradiction, but it's something that people are amazed to hear, because the misconception of like, oh, you remember everything, so how could you forget all these personal items? You know, it's
Right.
yeah. Is that, do you see the same thing when you were a kid, or
I'm still like that, and like that's why I've really started studying personality types, because that really does overlap. And my type, I'm an INFJ jumper, and essentially we're walking heads. Like that's all it is. It's we're so
INFJ?
disconnected from the actual reality
Yeah,
that we're just constantly going and constantly doing things, and it's like we're just bulldozing through like physical space.
yeah, that's interesting. You said you're INFJ.
Yeah, jump. In OPS, there's a 512 system, so
Okay.
it like really dives down into like actual cognitive functions rather than
Mhm.
dichotomies, more or less.
Okay, that you, it's Myers Briggs, right? The INF, or
Yeah, it's Myers-Briggs. So Carl Jung was the original back in about 100 years ago. And then they started like finding the 16, and they found 32, and so on and so forth. And maybe I'll teach a lesson on here one day about, I mean, kind of the functions and what they all mean. But
yeah, I'm curious. I did one of those through my old job, and I'm ENFP is what I.
I wouldn't be surprised. I
Yeah.
definitely see that NE from you, extroverted intuition.
Yeah. Although
Like,
just, oh, I was just gonna say, side note, the older I get, the less of the E is out there. I mean, I still like interaction, interpersonal interaction,
yeah,
but I find myself, this is maybe not HSAM related. This is just a getting older thing. It's like having clearer boundaries, or kind of needing the me time, or being more exhausted if I'm eating like crazy, right?
yeah. No,
Like needing a time when it's like, this is just a Joey day. I don't do anything. I don't really see anybody. I need to like recharge. And I didn't have that as much as a kid, you know, or as a younger adult. So
no, that's definitely I mean, that also comes down because like you can be technically an extrovert in OPS, like because I have that consume last. I'm a blaster. I like sharing, giving information, teaching.
mhm.
But you'll have ENFPs that are like play last or blast last, that are just going like channel changers. They go from chaos to chaos to chaos. They think of a new idea, they jump around. But that's not actual extroversion. That's just their extroverted intuition jumping from one thing to another. So that's where you get the E versus I is, what is your dominant function? Is it outward or inward, rather than is it actually interacting with people?
Mm. Yeah, that's okay. That's interesting. Yeah, I can see that.
Like IJs, like normal Myers-Briggs IJs, are actually more extroverted than Myers-Briggs EP types too. So it gets really, really um, down into that, which why there it's a story for another day, but it is kind of an interesting, like I've spent so much time where I'm like I can type someone, and then Anna, which she's actually dissed us for today. I taught her the system, and we go back and forth on our Saturday night events, and we'll like type someone, and at the end of the day we'll like discuss, and we'll usually come to the same type, just because we study the definitions
Mm.
to the extent of where we can get the same general type. Maybe we have one out of the 8 coins missing or whatever, but it's fairly accurate at that point, rather than like standard Myers-Briggs or the Big Five or something like that.
That's even interesting what you said too, the misconception of, oh, if you're an E, you're good with people. Or if you're an
Yeah,
I,
exactly.
you're antisocial. Not true. I know that to be kind of a
Oh,
misconception.
definitely.
Yeah, yeah.
But another thing is I wanted to mention is when I was actually going through the studies, and I've told you this before, I told them about my brain surgery, and they actually kind of hung on to that because I'm the only HSAMmer that it has had MRIs like from when I was like not even, yeah, just a month old, all the way up until I was 6 or 7.
Wow.
So they were like, "Oh my God, we need this," but because the MRI machines back then were so outdated, like there's,
That's interesting.
but they hung on to that. And the more I looked and then started like studying other HSAMers, just observing, not right, actually doing the scientific method of writing down or whatever, I noticed that you guys don't have those dopamine hits like I do.
Mm.
And like either it's like a mini seizure or whatever it is, I need to figure it out either way. But um like I talked to my friend one day and he was explaining the same exact thing, but he was describing it when he was on drugs. And I'm like, oh God, am I literally getting high off my own thoughts? And so I reached out to you and we were going back and forth on that.
That's kind of, I mean, I think that's a, that's like a drug abuse education teacher's dream, right? To say that it can happen, that you don't need drugs to get yourself high. You could be high on your own thoughts.
Yeah, exactly. That's
But I mean, but all jokes aside, like that is really cool. And I remember, yeah, we were talking about this, and I can't quite relate. I mean, I certainly can. I can relate to feeling really high highs and really low lows. Perhaps sort of a bipolar situation, even though I'm not diagnosed with it. I don't believe I have it, but I
Mhm.
certainly know how it is to sometimes feel like you're walking on air, or just feel that rush of dopamine without any stimulant, without any drug. But I feel like you experience that more intensely,
Yeah.
which is very interesting to me, because yeah. Can you? I'm just like, can you talk a little more about that? Because
So
that's really cool.
it's basically like getting goosebumps, but like I've just had goosebumps a second ago. Like it's not really affecting me.
Just happened.
But especially when I'm so low on dopamine as is, like I don't do anything actually fun or simulating or anything like that. I get into this like state, not depressed, but just bored state. And then all of a sudden, like I'll get this like a little tingle on the back of my head. Will go up. I'll start flashing with a bunch of memories, and then it will just like rush down my body all the way, and I'll just feel this bliss. Can't
Whoa.
explain it, but like goosebumps to the extreme. My hair feels like it's growing. Most people will say that when they're on LSD. Like it's that intense dopamine hit, but it happens spontaneously. Maybe I'm happy. Like I had one this morning. It was just like, oh, this feels really good. But when I'm depressed or upset or whatever, that's when it hits the most extreme.
Hmm. So I wonder if it magnifies, because it's like a chicken and an egg thing. I'm thinking of, does the dopamine hit trigger the memories, or is the memories welling up a result
I
of?
think it could happen either way.
Yeah,
Like sometimes it's just a random thought. I'm like, I get an ego hit, and it's all of a sudden it triggers a dopamine hit.
yeah.
Like, or maybe it's just spontaneous. Like, my dad fell off a balcony a couple years back. He had an accident in Galveston, and I was worried and just upset, and all of a sudden I was at just laying in bed, and whew,
Wow.
like memory after memory after memory just hitting like a screensaver, just one of those flash Big Bang Theory openings, like
Yes.
constant like that.
Wow. And but so that, so, okay, essentially that always the memory release always comes from the initial hit,
Yeah,
or they're connected somehow. That
yeah,
they're
exactly. And that could mean that I have something other than HSAM or hyperthymesia. Um what I call hyperthymesia proper, which is kind of like the original HSAM discovery, like about Mary Lou, or any of the, maybe you have the proper condition, but maybe those dopamine triggers kind of hardwired my brain through neuroplasticity to remember everything, because dopamine is a factor in memory. Like if you have dopamine hit, your brain knows that feels good, you should go back to it. And it tricks my brain into remembering the most random things, like a random pin that I got this one, like last December. Like it felt good. I can't explain it.
That's really interesting. And the memory rush, just out of curiosity, in those moments, it's not, it's random, or it's kind of like you said, Big Bang Theory opening, like a rush of things. Is there any like, Is there any theme to it ever? Is there any
It
chronology?
really depends. It really
Yeah.
depends. And I don't know how much I can say on here because it involves other people, relationships I had in the past that I would like to get into more depth about, but I wouldn't want to do it on camera. But yeah, sometimes it's really happy moments I've had in my life, or just spontaneous, random, I mean, good things that happen. I mean, not boring, dull, depressing memories, but just every other day, like going to lunch and talking to a friend, like those memories.
That's interesting. And then I'm wondering if the how do I say it? Like if then that cascade of, so the dopamine hit comes, the memories cascade, then
Mhm.
is the mood altered or enhanced by those memories? Like I'm wondering when you're in your head with memories, because I this is how I sort of am sometimes. Like that alone can be overwhelming, bring me to tears of sadness, bring me to the biggest grin on my face. So is it, what happens then? Do those
Um,
memories support that hit or make you feel worse or better depending on?
Makes me, I mean, a lot of them make me feel better, but
Yeah.
it's like such an instant hit. Like it will go from I'll be in like a normal baseline mood, get that really high, and then it starts to level out.
Interesting. Fascinating. Yeah. I think, yeah, it just again speaks to the different manifestations of how this works. Cause I relate a little, I don't have it exactly that way in terms of the intense dopamine,
Hmm.
but I definitely relate to the kind of cascade of memories all at once, randomly, kind of all swimming around in my head, and sometimes it peaks, and sometimes there are these intense moments where I'm just remembering a lot of random stuff, and that has the potential to bring me up or down, this, given the content of the memories, I guess.
No, yeah. I mean, I've had that. I mean, just the other day. I mean, just the spontaneous memory combustion without the hits. Like it's all. I mean, I don't even know how to describe it because it's like its own manifestation of the condition that's completely separate from the hit.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it kind of, and I know we touched on this a little when we were talking. It reminds me or makes me think of like PTSD or trauma, like
Hmm.
how people like us, and it again, the research is so new, and I would never want to say HSAM is PTSD because I think that's false. But I think the way memory works for me sometimes, it feels a little like PTSD,
Hmm.
you know. And even if the even if and not trauma in the traditional sense of like being in war or having something really egregious and awful happen to you, it can be micro trauma. It can be just having a memory repeat that's unpleasant,
Hmm.
that was maybe
Exactly.
that was a foundational trauma in the sense of like, kids laughing at you in gym class. That was me.
No, and I hang
You
on to
know?
those. Like there's certain things where it's like I did something stupid and or said something stupid,
Yeah,
and it's like it doesn't go away. Like even
that
a couple weeks ago, I was talking about my 10-year plan or my 20-year plan to my instructor, and I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna build my own cybersecurity school once become the best of the best. And it's like I said that to my instructor. Like that goes against one of my fundamental rules, and I just held on to that embarrassment and it still is there.
and you judged yourself a little in that moment, or
Hmm.
because I definitely
Yeah.
do. Yeah,
No, definitely.
yeah. It's I know it's hard. I mean, and I think there's some intersectionality here in terms of just like, all the Zen principles of mental health. Like you have to forgive yourself, and you have to, don't be too hard on yourself, like that. I try to practice mindfulness in that way for what it's worth, because that makes me have more empathy for others, and,
Hmm.
and myself, probably myself first. You know how it is. You have to love yourself first before you can
Yeah.
bestow that upon the world. But yeah, I just wonder, because it's sort of the same for me. Like I remember, this is so random, but like in fifth grade, my gym teacher yelled at me for kicking the soccer ball wrong. Like so random. And this was 25 years ago. Like this was
Mhm.
a long time ago. And it isn't so much that like if I saw her at the supermarket back in my hometown, I would, tell her off. Like I'm not bitter about it. Like she, and that I think is, not to go down this mental health wormhole, but like that's just something I'm personally working on. It's like I don't she didn't wake up that day saying, I'm going to ruin this kid's life, or I'm going to give him a memory that he's going to be thinking about 25 years later, right? She was just a gym teacher in Ohio in the 90s, which, relatively speaking, much less woke than today, right? Much teachers were, a little more tough love back then. And so I sound like an old man,
Yeah.
but it's true,
No, I
right?
know
So
what you're like.
I don't blame her. I'm not mad at her, but the feeling, the unpleasant feeling every time I think of that memory, it can really bring me down sometimes, because it's not just blaming myself, but it's like, it was a moment of, I guess there are these moments that we all have in childhood where, which again, it could be trauma, call it whatever you want, but it's like a loss of innocence. Like in this case, the gym teacher was yelling and calling me out for doing something that was kind of like not that big of a deal, right? I just didn't understand the rules of the soccer game. And she was yelling at me. And in my head, I'm like, oh, if she's yelling at me, it gives the students free reign to yell at me, right? There's no barrier, there's no protection. You know what I mean? Like usually the teacher's the one to be like, oh, don't do that. Come on, come on, come on, be nice. But the teacher was in on it. So I remember feeling really powerless in that moment. And this kind of just ties into like, is a deep emotional state more, when we are in deep emotional states, are we more likely to absorb the information and remember it, even if it is traumatic? I don't know. That kind of goes into its own thing, but I wonder about that. And another memory from childhood that I couldn't tell you the date that it happened, but I was 6 years old, and we're driving in the car with our friends, the three kids around my age, and the mother's father, so the grandfather, is in the front seat, and he starts having a seizure. The mom freaks out and turns the car around. We rush to the hospital. Like that was one of the first memories I have of like, oh, adults don't know what the fuck is going on either in life. Like adults are supposed to be in charge, right? And here they are, pillars of strength. And I don't fault my friend's mother for freaking out. It was her father who was having the seizure, and she was, I get it. She was scared. But in that moment, it was like, that's again, not necessarily a trauma, but it's slightly traumatic in that you're learning, or for me in my young 5, 6 year old brain, I'm learning, oh yeah, we're all kind of making this up as we go along, right? Like anything can happen at any time to make us react this way. The way I've never seen my friend's mother acting this way, and yet here she is, totally unglued, like totally hysterical. So anyway, I just went down a huge wormhole, but I wonder, I wonder about all that stuff.
No, yeah. Like, I mean, even the time I had a seizure, I can remember it so vividly up until like the minute before.
Wow.
Because I walked out of the theater. It was December 1st, 2018. I got hit by my ex's boyfriend because something I said to him in a class I didn't have. He had some mental issues.
Oh,
And he was like, what did you say to me? I'm like, I don't barely know you, and you just hit, and you're yelling at me. Okay, I'm just gonna sit. And he just started punching at me. 4 days later, because it was my right temporal lobe, that's where my surgery was. So I probably had some scar tissue left over, and if I had my mild concussion or something like that, it might have caught me basically taking time bomb for a seizure. So I was walking out of the theater, went to use the restroom, basically got so dizzy I fell over. And I'm like, okay, I need to, like, my eyes were so dilated, ran back around my dad. I'm like, there's something wrong. There's something wrong. He looked at my eyes and he's like, yeah, you're having a seizure. Walked out to the truck. Don't remember anything. I mean, remember that walking out, going to the parking lot, walking a couple feet, and then all of a sudden waking up in the truck.
Wow. I'm sorry that happened to you. Yeah. But it's, something else that's kind of random, but I've always thought, as we're sort of talking about childhood stuff, I fell off a slide when I was 5.
Yeah.
And it was on the actual gravel. Like this was, again, like 1980s, 90s, like what the hell were they doing? I suppose it was even worse before that. But like,
oh, I know the little small rocks, not like the granite gravel.
I just laugh at, like, I feel like parents today are so, like, helicopter parents, and they have kids on leashes, but in the 80s and 90s they literally just let us run. It's like 5 days later you show up, oh, I'm glad you're alive, we're serving dinner now.
Exactly.
But it was not like they had, after the fact they put that like rubber covering, you know, the like rubber cushioning beneath
Oh
the
yeah.
slide, so that, but before there was nothing there. So I don't know how high up it was, maybe like, I don't know, maybe like 15, 20 feet, not like super high, but high enough, right? So I fall off the slide, hit my head, have a like, I think there was it was a hematoma or bleeding on the brain, and it was a concussion and then a hematoma. So I had to go to the hospital for 5 days, and I'm 5 years old. And it was, I think it was, at the beginning it was scary because like they didn't know what was going to happen and if I was going to have permanent brain damage. And luckily, knock on wood, I was okay. 5, 6 days later, I would get released from the hospital. I'm home and I'm recovering. But I've always wondered, like, it's almost an unanswerable question because there's no way to know. Like, did that bump to the head trigger HSAM, trigger all of this, trigger anything, or was that just,
Where
again,
was the bleeding?
where was the bleeding?
Yeah.
That's a great question. I don't, somewhere in the brain. I don't know exactly where.
If it was temporal lobe, then that could be a possibility.
Maybe. Oh, the
That would
thing.
be
Yeah, I was just thinking, like, the big missing data point, I guess, in all this is like I don't recall at that moment all of a sudden the memory kicking in. Right. It wasn't like I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Phenomenon with John Travolta. He like has an event happen to him, and then it's like a BCAD moment where immediately after the event happens, he can like learn a language in 2 seconds, and he's like wonderkind. That wasn't how it was for me. You know what I mean? So I don't know if that triggered anything in my head, but yeah, I've always wondered about that. I've always
no.
wondered.
That's the same thing with my tumor. I'm like, did that
Yeah.
random tumor and no surgery cause me to be who I am now?
And
Well,
how old?
obviously through history, yes, but I mean,
Yeah.
actually memory wise.
And how old
And
were you when you had that?
it formed before I was even born. So
Wow.
like they're estimating about 2 weeks. So it
Wow.
puts it right at Thursday, December 5th, 2002, when it started to form, and then born 12 days later.
Wow.
And then I had my first seizure was the day that the Columbus space shuttle blew up.
February 1st, 2003. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yep.
And had surgery Monday, March 10th, 2003. About because I was way too young, way too small. I don't know if it's Irish genetics or just because the tumor wasn't allowing me to eat, and it was just I wasn't actually gaining any weight, but they had to wait a month for to remove it. And
Wow.
and then from there, I mean, yeah, I had seizures after that just because scar tissue. But here's another one. New Year's Day 2005, 700 days after my first seizure, I had one, and I had another one after not having them for a while.
And I'm curious, I'm thinking no, but maybe you did. Do you remember that? Because you were 2 then, right?
I remember, yes, I actually kind of remember it, but because seizures do interfere with memory in a certain way, it like just like the one on also Saturday, December 1st, 2018, I blank out and lose memory about a minute or two of memory. So,
Wow.
but I remember feeling dizzy. I remember going inside, laying down, and then my grandmother comes in and realizes what's going on.
Wow. That was December 1st, 2018, you said. Okay. So you're like,
What were you doing that day?
I was actually thinking, it's so random. I went on a not so great date that day. Actually, it was okay. He was a lovely person. It just didn't work out. But we were like, I can see like the bar, the interior. I couldn't tell you the name of it, but you know how it kind of works. It's like sometimes details are missing, but I can see the inside of this bar. It was like next to a very hokey holiday themed bar. Like they had Santas outside. It was like real because it was Christmas time. So yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
What was I gonna ask you? Oh, I'm just wondering, out of curiosity, do you have any recall of your first memory, or like among the one of the first things you ever?
So I have the most confirmed first memory because back then I mean, it could even be with my seizures and stuff like that. The timeline is so messy. But when my sister was born, and after my sister was born, my grandparents were leaving, or even before. No, wait, even before that. So I was at my dad's mom's house, and I was up till like 2 o'clock listening to Little Einsteins and
Nice.
all of the classical music would play. And there's certain songs that for whatever reason I forget the exact tune of them after I listen to them because it's like I remember this, but like 2 seconds later forget the exact. I don't know why. Just certain classical songs that they played, I remember when they're playing. I remember that I listened to it, but after that, I completely forget that tune. Don't know.
Interesting.
So that I remember, and then my grandmother, my mom's mom, was leaving town, going back to Houston, and my sister was sitting there. I was looking at my sister and looking at my grandmother, and I mean, my mom obviously knew what I was thinking. Where I was like, "Are you gonna take this creature? You gonna like bring her back? Like, why are you leaving your what's going on? Why?" And my mom was telling me that years later, and I'm like, "Yeah, I actually do remember bits and pieces of that."
And how old were you then?
16 months.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. So you were really young.
Yeah,
Yeah.
what about you?
I was just thinking. I don't know. I must have been about two. It was older than 60 months, but I was in like a baby pool. I remember the sensation of like if you can probably know what I mean. Like when you close your eyes underwater, you
Hmm.
almost like see little weird shapes, or like it's hard to explain,
Yeah.
but just the sensation of closing your eyes underwater. I remember doing that in this little baby pool when I was
Hmm.
probably not even three.
By 2 years old, I was actually having the majority of my memories. Like, like I can remember so much from when I was 2, 3, 4, and then once I was like 5, the although I didn't remember dates, ever you can mention an event and I can remember that. But like
Mhm.
2 to 5 is essentially how most people without age then remember. Which like I remember the 12, the what Mary Lou always calls the 12 events per year. Like that's been like that when I was like 2 and 3.
Okay, interesting. I remember random bit. I remember like the shape of the and the color of the bowl that I used to eat macaroni and cheese from.
Yeah.
I remember when
Hmm.
we moved houses when I was three, right before I turned four, the of summer, right? Yeah, before, like I was a couple months shy of being four, and I remember like approaching the house that we lived at and the lock on the door, just like random stuff like that.
Hmm.
And I remember that it was June 15th of 1988. Like, but I may not have remember. This is a thing, right? Like that was on my mom's calendar. So like I don't always know if in the moment I was aware, oh, this is June 15th of '88, or I saw it on the calendar and then internalized that. It works both ways. But
Yeah.
it's interesting. You maybe you maybe also think of music. You're talking about not remembering the a piece of classical music like you had just heard and then not always being able to recite it back. Is that correct? Kind of.
Yeah.
I always wonder.
But it was only from that one night. That's what I'm trying to say.
Oh, okay, okay.
Like I can remember it afterwards or
Yeah.
different songs but for whatever reason, the songs I heard that night
Oh, okay.
instill in my brain, like in the subconscious, to where I'm just automatically forgetting it afterwards.
That's interesting. Yeah. It just made me think of music in general. And again, it's a thing in my head. I ask myself, like, do I just happen to like music and this ability enhances it? Or is it all tied into like why I like music? But I tend to remember and I tend to like remember songs that I like, and especially like formative years growing up, like let's just say pop music of the 80s and 90s. Like I can probably on a dime, I know these songs like in my sleep, right? But I also know the key that the song is in, like the melody. I can sing back to you the melody of a pop song in the correct key. And my best friend's always making fun of me because he loves to sing and he's always singing. And I'm like, Mike, sing it in the right key. And he's like, what do you mean? This is the so I assume that everybody just kind of knows the right keys of songs, but I guess not. Like
Yeah.
I don't
That's
know.
I can't. That's speaking of synesthesia, down that rabbit hole,
Hmm.
music and all of that. Did you ever have a strong sense of synesthesia when you were younger, or do you still have that?
I don't define that for me again, please, just because I'm
So, so you can see sounds or like basically you have I mean, even an internalized system of knowing exactly what key or what note is playing by like a object or a color or even a sensation.
I guess I have a touch of that then. I mean, I certainly,
I mean, you could
yeah.
go in many different ways. Like for me, I used to see like literally an aura around my mom or anyone else when they were
Mm.
upset. I could internalize their emotions and
Whoa,
like project it outwards.
interesting. Yeah, I think sometimes I see music in color, or I have sort of a, it's hard to put into words. I have such a, I usually have such an emotional reaction to music.
Hmm.
Music that's pleasing to me or pleasurable or nostalgic. I think that's that combo too is always right.
Hmm.
And especially like, again, growing up, let's just say for me in the coming of age in like the 90s and or 2000s, like you play for me a pop song in that era, I might be in tears within seconds.
Oh yeah.
It's not because
Okay.
I'm depressed or sad. It's just like the nostalgia from that song, right? Dancing at the school dance, maybe my first kiss, maybe it was a happy, maybe it was a graduation memory, maybe or maybe just a random memory of like being young and innocent, right? Like,
No, no, that's exactly. Ironically, I listened to a lot of 80s and 90s songs my freshman year of high school back in the 17,
wow.
and um, a lot of country. I'm an old soul in that way, but I will play them again, like, and I'll yeah, same thing. I'll be in tears, and I can't replay the song over and over again because it loses its sensation. But if I
Yeah.
play a song, wait 4 or 5 years, play it again and I'll remember those emotions. I'll like replay it and want to indulge in it. And then
Yeah.
obviously it's just self-fulfilling prophecy where I lose the emotions to it anyway.
I heard this song in 2007, and this was also I listening to the radio at my work. The song "Before He Cheats" by Carrie Underwood. Um,
No.
I dug my key into the sun. It's actually a really good song, but I hated it after that year was over because I heard it all the time. And like
Hmm.
I'm just remembering, like then 4 years or so passed, I didn't hear it. I heard it again. I'm like, oh, I this is actually a good song. I just hadn't heard it in so long that it
Yeah,
like
exactly. What was another one I used to play all the time? Um, 1, 2, 3. It was a Tim McGraw song, Fly Away.
oh yeah, nice.
That one I used to sing to myself all the time. Forgot, didn't know the name of it. Looked it up back in 2018 when I was going through like buying all sorts of music, and I bought that one, and yeah, brought back a lot of kindergarten and first grade memories
Oh,
from it.
I love that. Yeah, this also is something interesting. If I find the article, I'll send it to you because I think you might appreciate like the nature of song structure has changed, and it has something to do with like our collective memories. So like you take a song from the 90s or 80s or back further, and it's kind of that structure of like verse one, chorus, verse two, chorus, refrain, bridge, then back to the chorus or back to another verse, right? It's like a 4 minute song. And now our attention spans are such that you've got like think of like a Billie Eilish or something. Like the structure is different. It's a 2 or 3 minute song max, and there may not be that same progression or structure of verse, chorus, verse, chorus. It just might jump right in, to you're a rough guy, like a really tough guy, whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
That's just one example, but there's so many, artists and
Exactly.
songwriters now that are rejecting that old. And that's kind of also like back when songs were with labels and record labels and stuff where like you had to have a certain amount of real estate on an album or songs had to be for or whatever, right? It's totally different now. I just but it's tied into memory, I think, and it's tied into like how we just our attention spans are shorter. Like we're only going to listen to 30 minutes, a minute of the song if it doesn't pull us in. You know what I mean? Or
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And
interesting. Oh,
I
have we
mean,
have we solved all the problems of the world?
pretty much.
Yeah.
But yeah, for the last couple minutes, if you want, we can just go throw back dates back and forth if you want.
Sure. Yeah. Do we cover? I feel like definitely cover a lot of ground. Anything else you wanted to you were curious about, or
I'm
obviously the conversation will
honestly,
continue.
I'm gonna
Conversation.
be texting you later this afternoon. I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot about this. Ask you
And
this.
you know what? We can do this or get on a call like at any time. Like this is the
Yeah,
conversation that's ongoing and never ends.
yeah.
About
And are you willing to do more podcasts in the future? Because
yeah,
and
totally.
obviously you're coming to the Knights event, which I need to actually, I mean, obviously this is gonna go up afterwards, but in the
Yeah,
YouTube video, I'm gonna link my meetups and stuff like that. so people can join and hang out and whatever.
Cool.
But yeah, if I have anything, but yeah, for the last couple of minutes, we want to like throw back random dates.
Yeah.
What were you doing February 1st, 2003? I'm curious.
February 1st, 2003. That was the day of the Columbia. Yes.
Yeah.
Was that a seizure day for you? I forgot. It was.
Yeah, that was the original seizure. That's when they found I had a tumor.
Wow. And you were just 2 months old.
I was a month old.
Wow.
I was 1 month and what? 1 month and a half.
December 17th, your birthday?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. What I was doing that day, this is gonna make me sound old, but like whatever. I was in high school and I was at a speech and debate tournament because I did impromptu speaking in high school, which is basically like they give you a topic and you have 5 minutes or so, and then it's good for bullshitting. And my first job was sales, so that was perfect for that because you kind of have to think on the fly, you know. So I was I remember like being at the speech and debate tournament because they had them on Saturday afternoons, and I was there, and that's when I learned about the Columbia, that event. I remember.
Yeah.
And the night before, again, just totally random and weird. I remember I watched the movie. I don't know if you've seen this movie with Michael Douglas and Glenn Close called Fatal Attraction. It's a movie from 1987. It's basically a PSA like don't cheat on your wife because Glenn Close is the I'm spoilering it, sorry.
No worries, no worries.
Michael Douglas cheats on his wife with Glenn Close, and then she turns out to be like a crazy psycho bitch. And I watched it with my mom, and I just remember laughing because like there's a lot of really intense sex scenes, you know, like really graphic sex scenes. They're fucking everywhere. Sorry to use the word.
No worries, no
But
worries.
it's just like awkward to watch. I'm 17. I'm watching this with my mom. I'm like, oh, this is uncomfortable.
Yeah,
but it's a good movie. It's a good movie. But that's what I was doing on January 31st / February 1st, 2003.
What about when I was born? I know that I'm putting you in a that far back.
On December 17th. No, that's okay. Just it's good. It's good. Like what's the word I use? Sort of like it's like aerobics for your mind, kind of. You know, taking your brain to the gym makes it work. On the day you were born, on December 17th, 2002. And actually, this is a good way to describe how this happens. I may not always remember the actual date, but I'll remember like the day before I was in school, and Mr. Beach was my religion teacher. We had a quiz, like just random stuff like that. There is no memory that's screaming at me from the 17th, but I then remember like the 18th, I was watching like some SNL Christmas special. Like Tina Fey was hosting it. Yeah. So just like random stuff like that. But I don't have that memory doesn't scream at me from the.
What was the day of the week though? I mean, I mentioned earlier.
Oh, on Tuesday the 17th. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Throw something at me.
It's always so
2017, please.
Whenever people, ask, like if it's journalists or if ever I'm being interviewed and people ask for dates, I always feel so self-indulgent because it truly is like
it's addicting. It is. You're right.
But in my head, I'm like screaming, like, who cares that you saw Fatal Attraction? But obviously, it's part of the memory of the day. So
yeah, exactly. I know it. I'm like, give it to me. I need more.
Yes. Okay. So how about, and I have a memory from this day. For me, it was a fun memory of. It was my office's summer party. They have like a big blowout event this day. It was June 15th of 2017. So I'm wondering if you have a memory.
Okay. So I remember so that's kind of before I remember the dates, but that would have been the Thursday.
Mm-hmm. What about also?
Oh, yes, I know what happened that day. My mom was actually going down to Austin to visit a friend.
Wow.
That Saturday, I remodeled my closet. So I ripped out all like the old wooden built-in shelving and just replaced it with wire shelves and like reorganized it. But it took like that entire weekend.
On the 17th or the 10th?
The 17th.
17th, okay. How about June 15th, 2018? Out of curiosity.
June 15th, 2018. So Father's Day was that Sunday. I was actually just hanging out. There wasn't a whole lot to do. I was listening to horror stories, stuff like that. Um, just got back from my grandparents' farm. I literally walked through the woods, and I was actually talking about the week before yesterday. Um, got so many chiggers and tick bites, like it was horrible.
Ooh,
Like I could not get out of the house for that entire week.
that's
Just because I was so itchy. I was taking bleach baths like every
oh,
hour. Like it was painful.
so
15th obviously was a Friday. Yeah, just hung out. Went to Hurricane Harbor on Father's Day, so 17th. Started driver's ed that next Monday.
oh, driver's ed. Do you remember? Did I'm just laughing because my driver's ed test was like it was basically driving around a parking lot and stopping at a stop sign. I'm like, how are they giving me a license? I didn't even have to go on the freeway. Did you have to do the same thing, or did you have to go on the freeway?
I didn't have to go on a freeway, but I had to go actually on roads. So
Yeah.
they would train us and they would actually grade us on the freeway beforehand, but it wasn't the actual test that they would do freeway.
Oh, okay, okay. I guess that's true. Now I'm remembering, I did go driving with the driver's ed teacher like all over the place, but the actual test, I'm just laughing because the actual test to determine whether you get your license is like drive around this parking lot of this relatively like low traffic mall area, right, where there's no
Did
and
you take it
stop
at
and
the
see what's
DMV
like.
or did your driver's ed supply the test for you?
I think it was a DMV.
Okay, yeah.
Actually, I think so, but
I got a discount. I mean, we got to do it within the week because DMVs now, or no matter what state or what area you're in, they're always overloaded. So I booked it, $100, did it that weekend, March 30th, 2019. Um, honestly, and I even will mention Alyssa A in here. She was actually on TV too, but she was the week before. Me and her both were working on a show on The Little Mermaid. Obviously, I was theater tech, and she was actually acting, but it was two different places, two completely different states across the country, but we were doing the same exact thing. So
wild. Was
that was a
she
tangent.
was she in the Little Mermaid? Was she Ariel?
I don't know who she was, but I just remember we were talking about it, and I was throwing March 23rd out because that's one of those days that I really like. And she was like, "Yeah, I was doing Little Mermaid." I'm like, by the way, I was working on. I was literally helping the junior high kids get set up on that show. I wasn't miking quite yet, but we
Yeah,
were getting the set. We were putting stuff together.
I love
Um,
that.
but yeah, throw it something else other than June 15th.
That I'm just thinking too. Just fun fact. That's one of my favorites. Um, the song from Little Mermaid. I want to be where the people are. That's like one of
Oh,
my favorite declarative song. Like every Disney movie
yeah,
has
yeah.
the song where the protagonist declares what they want, right? And that's one of my favorite. Like I just can't wait to be king and Lion King, or you know the songs, right? The declarative protagonist, like this is what I want from the world. That's one of my favorites.
What were
um,
you doing March 23rd, 2007?
um, that was I'm laughing because that was such a blurry time for me, Brendan. I was a senior in college, so I basically like, and I was not historically I've not been like a huge drinker. I'm just not, whether it's genetics or preference, personal
Yeah.
preference. Like I enjoy, good alcohol when it comes, but I've never really been a big like booze hound. But that semester of my life, I was a big booze hound because it was senior year, and I was like, well, it was sort of that like end of the
Yeah.
world feeling of like this is it. So I just came back from Cancun, which that's why I was laughing, because it's like the most token like white college male in the US thing to do is we'll go to Cancun, right? How original.
Yeah.
But I was coming back from Cancun on that Friday, March 23rd, 2007. Um, so here's one for you, and I have a reason why I'm asking. You'll probably kind of figure it out. What were you doing on April 25th, 2020?
All right. So let me think. There obviously there's a Wednesday the 15th.
Mhm.
I remember the 28th, I was talking to one of my teachers. 24th, 23rd.
Yeah. Did you have a memory from the 15th, you said? From Wednesday the 20 or the 15th? Or are you just curious?
Honestly, I could tell you what I was doing, but it was pretty much the same exact thing, like great basically repeating over and over and over again. Whatever the movie's called. Groundhog
Yeah.
Day.
Yeah.
I was walking, but I basically walked 10 miles I walked 10 miles a day every single day, and did some schoolwork. That was pretty much it up until like May 15th when I would start working for my dad. Why? What happened?
Well, yeah, I was curious because like you touched on it, that those first few months of COVID when it hit was so
Mhm.
and the reason I asked is like 'cause the monotony of it, I think is such that like I don't always remember what I was doing in April of 2020. Like it like you said, it was a Groundhog Day kind of a thing where it was almost the same thing every day over and over. So
Yeah.
I just the thing that sticks out for me about April 25th, 2020 is I was just really angry about politics.
Yeah.
But as you said, I was probably it was the same kind of thing I was doing for multiple days during those first few months of COVID, kind of just because I was at the time unemployed, couldn't really go out and do much. So I was actually walking a lot in those days as well. I still love to walk every day, but there was like not much to do other than like walk around. So
Exactly. I
one
mean,
of the yeah, I was gonna say like a reporter had contacted me from the I think from the Wall Street Journal to basically ask like is your HSAM better or worse in these weird times where every day is kind of the same, like during lockdown. You know what I mean?
yeah.
And
I
I
mean,
couldn't
that era is very nostalgic for me, just
that
because it
era
was, I
is.
called it the Reformation era. Like I told you, I had an ex that lost her memory.
At
Just
the end of
everything went to hell. I mean, way before COVID,
yeah.
and COVID was that kind of era where things were bad, but I had so much free time to basically reform myself, go
Yes.
work out, go do stuff for when COVID ends, that
Hmm.
I have the fundamentals to like rebuild everything I lost before COVID.
That's awesome. It was December 5th, 2019. Is that the day that
Yes.
okay. So
And
that
that
was
was the 17th anniversary of my brain, the
wow. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
so I mean it kind
Part
of
of
Uno invert, I call it the Uno inverted card, but it's the same situation, just 17
it.
years later.
Really
And it
interesting.
would be interesting to see if she actually gained HSAM from it, or like I know that's probably not possible, but
Who
it,
knows?
like
Who
it's a
knows?
temporal lobe injury similar to what I had. Like, but she was much older, so there's probably a lot less neuroplasticity to it.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's interesting. Okay, last one for me. What were you doing on tell me about December 18th, 2018.
Sorry, 18, 2018. So that was a Tuesday. I actually was talking about that day not too long ago because
Hmm.
it's the same month date pattern as this month.
Yeah,
Um,
yes.
I was I was doing a final for my tech theater class. It was we were doing the Willy Wonka setup, so we had to like actually design our own set, do all the drafting, everything. And that day I actually had I was working on that final like actual visual side of things rather than
Oh,
just the lines and numbers.
that's cool. That tunnel scene messed me up as a kid when they go in the tunnel scene, you know.
Yeah, I did. What was the scene I was doing? It was the nut, the one where the squirrels would collect all the nuts, and it would like you had the wall, and then behind that.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, 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 yeah.
It was the easiest scene I could do. I'm like, I am not doing anything complex. I have to literally do everything, do a 3D model, draft it up. Like, no, I'm not going that rabbit hole.
Was it ever? I'm curious. You were always tech. Did you ever? Were you ever an actor in any of these? Or
No, I was never good at acting. I always liked the behind the scenes. Like I wanted to be more on the leadership side, but never had the chance.
Mhm.
So I was always just crew.
Okay.
Um, it was just, yeah, that's what they put me as. But and then they got really mad when I was doing JRTC later on because I'm like, I actually got to do stuff. I actually got to be a part of it rather than like on the backhand for like 4 years. I'm like, you guy, I asked to be helping with stage management, learning about that, and all you want me to do is just build stuff and move stuff around when the shows come around. This is
Yeah.
boring. I want to
Yeah.
like I don't mind doing that freshman year. I get the seniors have seniority, the juniors get to have learn some of that. But the entire time was pretty much doing the most mundane things for staying at school for 17, yeah, about 17 hours a day for like an entire month. And I told them like, I'm not doing this. It was right around the time I was having the extreme flashbacks after my ex lost memory. And I'm like, I use GRTC as an excuse because I'm like, I can't handle all these fronts. Like, I'm literally being surrounded by this, that situation, and then a few things, my grades. And it was just like it was closing in. And I'm like, I'm going to kick this front out. I'm gonna fight on the two fronts in three. So and they got mad. But I still got a job to do auditorium technician stuff. March 5th, also Thursday the 5th, and then COVID hits a week later. So I spent 6 months working up to the job, and then all of a sudden it was like, nope, not gonna have that anymore.
That's March 6th, 2020 is Friday. I like went out that night. I remember because I hadn't been out like to a bar dancing for a while, and I'm like, oh, this is gonna be the new me. I'm gonna like go out now. Nope.
Yeah, the second you
Life
do
had a
that.
different plan for me, for all of us. So
Yeah, I know. Thursday the
okay.
5th, I always make fun of it. Like
Yeah.
first relationship, tumor developed, ex lost her memory, first job that never really got to keep. Yeah. Very eventful, but
Yeah. Life is I almost want to wax philosophical to end us here. I don't know. Just thinking like life is, I mean, I'm not saying anything that hasn't been said before. I'm amazed at the serendipitous nature of life and how, we are just a collection of all our experiences. You know what I mean? Which
mhm.
reminds me to try to continue to have empathy for myself and others because I truly believe that most of us are just trying to do the best we can in any given moment. You know what I mean? And
Yeah,
like life is funny that way. When it rains, it pours, things ebb and flow. And but I think and tying it all back to HSAM, it's like that's where it's beautiful and overwhelming for me. It's like I
mhm.
look at my life as this movie. Not that I'm better than anybody else or that it's particularly more interesting than anyone else's movie of life. It's just that I view my timeline in that sort of intimate way where it's like I would describe it this way to people like I'm a puppet on the timeline. Like I have a string attached to every memory and every day. And all I really have to do is pull on that string and then up pops, March 6th, 2020, or any of these dates we were just talking about. So it's like
Exactly.
it's that intimate connection to my timeline that maybe is the very essence of HSAM, or certainly the A in HSAM, the autobiographical nature of it. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's like I guess it's also helped me as I'm getting older too. It's helping me just like sit with and or reconcile two contradictions. You know what I mean? At the
Yeah.
very essence, life is messy and horrible. Life is beautiful and wonderful. Both are true, right? You have a traumatic experience, you have a joyful experience. Both are true. Like I don't know, you know what I'm saying? Like
No, I definitely hear you. Yeah.
maybe
It's
the reflective is too. I feel like you seem to be a reflective person, or you certainly think about life yourself. It's like that. I think that's good. The again running amok, the run amok of that is like you spiral out and you get way too in your head. But I definitely think it's a good thing in general to reflect upon your own life, yourself, your habits, who you are, to be self-reflective. I just feel like that would behoove that anybody would be benefited by that. You know what I mean? So
no,
anyway,
definitely. Like, yeah. So any future plans with this? I know I want to do some more. I mean,
I want to do whatever I can do. Yeah, talking about it, discussing it.
would you like to have any guests on, anything like that? Because I want you to be co-host, but I
Yeah,
honestly don't care either way. Like,
I mean, I could certainly do guests. I off the top of my head, I can't think of anybody, but I'm definitely down to talk about the ins and outs and all of it. Yeah, yeah. Do you want is by the way, the thing tonight, is it, do you, I forgot if you said if you have an agenda or if it's just kind of a free form
it's
discussion.
more free flowing.
Okay.
It's not jump from topic to topic like the other Sundays are, but
Uh-huh.
yeah, it's essentially like come in, talk, let's discuss. It's
Cool.
not get there's a kind of a stereotype within the HCM community, especially on the Facebook one, is you get bullied for not following the status quo.
Oh, yeah.
But other than that, I mean, it's pretty just easygoing, hang out, be a hippie for a little bit. I don't know.
I dig it. Cool. Okay. Well, I guess I will see you then.
All
Yeah.
right.
Down.
Sounds
Cool.
good.
Yeah,
Well,
man.
thank you for
Thanks
coming and
for
have a great rest of your day.